Blackthorn Park was once the pride of Woodhaven, a small, secluded town hidden deep in the Appalachian Mountains. Its winding trails, sparkling lake, and colorful carnival rides had drawn visitors from miles around. Families picnicked under the ancient oaks, couples rowed boats across the lake, and children screamed with joy on the Ferris wheel. That was decades ago. Now, the park lay abandoned, its gates rusted shut, and its grounds consumed by creeping ivy and thorny brambles. But even in its dereliction, it held a strange allure, one that beckoned the curious and the foolish to explore its eerie depths. The townsfolk whispered of strange occurrences in the park, stories of shadowy figures, distant screams, and unexplainable disappearances swirled like smoke through Woodhaven. Most dismissed these as old wives' tales, but others, those who had seen the park's secrets firsthand, spoke in hushed tones, their voices trembling with fear. It was late autumn when a group of 5 college friends decided to test the legend for themselves. The leader of the group, Mason, was a thrill-seeker who thrived on danger and dares. His girlfriend, Riley, was hesitant but loyal, unwilling to let him wander into the dark alone. Then there was Ethan, the skeptical realist, Paige, the paranormal enthusiast, and Tyler, who simply didn't want to be left out. Armed with flashlights, a map, and a healthy dose of bravado, they set out for Blackthorn Park on Halloween night. The wrought iron gates loomed before them, their once ornate patterns now tangled with vines. A faded sign above read, "Welcome to Blackthorn Park," in chipped, cheerful letters. The gate creaked loudly as Mason pushed it open, the sound echoing into the night. "Well, this isn't creepy at all," Ethan muttered, shining his flashlight into the overgrown path ahead. The air was heavy, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. A cold wind whispered through the trees, rustling the branches like skeletal fingers. "This place is awesome," Paige said, her camera already recording. "Can you imagine what it must have been like back in the day? All the lights, the music, the rides." "And now it's a total dump," Tyler added, kicking a rusted soda can. "What a shame." The group followed the cracked pathway deeper into the park. The remnants of attractions emerged from the shadows like ghosts of the past. The carousel stood frozen in time, its once proud horses chipped and weather-worn. The bumper cars were piled in a heap, their paint peeling and their frames riddled with rust. And in the distance, the Ferris wheel loomed, its skeletal frame silhouetted against the moonlit sky. "Do you hear that?" Riley asked, stopping abruptly. The others fell silent. Faintly, on the edge of hearing, there was a sound. A low, rhythmic creaking like metal swaying in the wind. But there was no wind now. The air was unnervingly still. "Probably just the old rides," Mason said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Let's keep moving." They ventured further, reaching the heart of the park where the carnival games once stood. Booths advertising prizes were now little more than skeletal frames, their contents long since scavenged or rotted away. But as Paige's flashlight swept over one booth, she froze. "Guys, look at this." The others gathered around. Inside the booth were rows of stuffed animals, pristine and untouched by time. Their glassy eyes seemed to watch the group, unblinking. One, a teddy bear with a red bow, sat at the edge of the counter as if waiting for someone to claim it. "That's weird," Ethan said, stepping back. "It's probably some kind of prank," Mason said, though he didn't sound convinced. He reached out to touch the bear, but Riley grabbed his arm. "Don't." "Why not? It's just a toy." "Just don't, okay?" she insisted, her voice trembling. Reluctantly, Mason stepped away. As they continued, the sense of unease grew. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. The creaking sound followed them, growing louder. They passed the lake, its surface black and still, reflecting the twisted branches overhead. That's when they saw the first sign of something truly wrong. Near the edge of the water was a single shoe. It was small, child-sized, and partially submerged in the mud. Beside it, the ground was disturbed as though something had been dragged into the lake. I'm not liking this, Riley said, clutching Mason's arm. Can we go back? Not yet, Mason said, though his bravado was waning. We haven't seen anything yet. Exactly, Ethan said. Nothing worth seeing, let's just call it a night. But Paige was already moving toward the Ferris wheel. Come on, this is where all the crazy stories come from, right? Let's check it out. The others reluctantly followed. Up close, the Ferris wheel was even more imposing. Its cars hung lopsided, swaying slightly despite the lack of wind. The metal was pitted with rust, and the air smelled faintly of iron and decay. As Paige aimed her camera at the wheel, something moved in the corner of her viewfinder. Did you see that? She whispered. See what? Tyler asked, turning his flashlight toward her. I don't know. I thought I saw something in one of the cars. They all directed their flashlights at the Ferris wheel. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, in the highest car, a shadow shifted. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but they all saw it. What the hell was that? Ethan asked, his voice rising. Probably an animal, Mason said, though he didn't sound sure. Let's check it out. Are you insane? Riley hissed. We need to leave now. But Mason was already climbing the rusted ladder that led to the wheel's control platform. The others watched in tense silence as he reached the top and peered into the control booth. The glass was shattered, and the interior was covered in thick black mold. Mason's flashlight flickered, casting erratic beams of light. Anything up there? Tyler called. No, just wait, Mason's voice faltered. He backed away from the booth, his face pale. There's something. A sudden, deafening screech tore through the air, a sound that was neither human nor animal. The Ferris wheel groaned as it began to turn, its rusted gears shrieking in protest. Mason scrambled down the ladder as the others screamed for him to hurry. From the shadows beneath the wheel, shapes began to emerge. They were humanoid but wrong, their limbs too long and their movements jerky, as if they were marionettes controlled by an unseen hand. Their faces were obscured by darkness, but their eyes glowed a sickly yellow. Run! Mason shouted as he hit the ground. The group bolted, their flashlights bouncing wildly as they sprinted back toward the entrance. The creatures gave chase, their twisted forms moving with unnatural speed. The air was filled with their guttural growls and the pounding of footsteps. The group reached the gates, but the rusted metal had twisted shut. Desperate, Mason and Ethan tried to force them open while the others screamed for help. The creatures closed in, their yellow eyes burning like lanterns in the dark. Just as one reached for Paige, a blinding light flooded the park. The creatures recoiled, hissing and shrieking as they melted into the shadows. A man stood on the other side of the gate, holding a massive spotlight. His face was weathered, and his eyes were hard. Get out of here, he growled, unlocking the gate with a massive set of keys. The group didn't hesitate, scrambling past him and collapsing on the ground outside. What were those things? Riley stammered. The man shook his. As the group stumbled to their car, their breaths visible in the cold night air, the eerie silence of the park behind them was almost more unsettling than the chaos they had just escaped. The man with the spotlight stood by the gates, unmoving, watching them with an intensity that made Riley shudder. We're not staying here another second, Mason muttered as he fumbled with the car keys, his hands trembling. The headlights flickered on, cutting through the dense darkness as the engine sputtered to life. Wait, Paige said, turning to glance back at the figure by the gate. Who is that guy, and why does he have the keys to the park? Who cares? Ethan snapped. He saved us. Let's get out of here before those things come back. As the car sped down the winding mountain road, the tension inside was palpable. No one spoke for several minutes, each replaying the night's horrors in their minds. Finally, Paige broke the silence. We can't just leave it like this. Those things are still out there. Leave it? Ethan barked a hollow laugh. Paige, what are you suggesting? That we go back and do something about them? Did you see them? That's not something we can fight. She's right, Riley added quietly. There's something really wrong with that place. What if more people wander in? They could die. That's not our problem, Mason said, gripping the wheel tightly. We got out alive, and that's all that matters. But what if... Paige began, only to be cut off as the car jerked violently to the side. Damn it! Mason shouted, slamming on the brakes. The vehicle skidded to a halt, the tires screeching against the damp pavement. A dark figure loomed in the middle of the road, illuminated by the headlights. It was the man from the park, standing completely still. How did he get here? Tyler stammered, his voice breaking. It's impossible, Riley whispered. We left him back there. The man raised one hand slowly, motioning for them to roll down the window. Mason hesitated, his jaw clenched, but finally lowered the glass a crack. What do you want? He demanded. You've seen him now, the man said, his gravelly voice barely audible over the sound of the engine. They won't let you leave. What do you mean? Riley asked, her voice trembling. We're already gone. We're miles away. The man stepped closer, his weathered face coming into clearer view. There was something unnerving about his eyes, sharp and piercing, as if they could see straight into their souls. They've marked you, he said. You set foot in their territory. They'll come for you now. No, Ethan said, shaking his head vehemently. That's not possible. We're out. We're safe. The man gave a humorless chuckle. You think the gates are enough to keep them in? They've tasted your fear. They've seen your faces, and they don't forget. Paige clutched her camera tightly. But you scared them off. How did you do that? Can't we just use the light? The man shook his head. The light keeps them at bay, but it doesn't stop them. Not for long. They'll follow the shadows. They'll wait until you're vulnerable. So what are we supposed to do? Mason asked, his voice rising. Just live with this for the rest of our lives? The man looked at them, his expression grave. There's only one way to stop them. What is it? Riley asked desperately. You have to go back, the man said, and destroy the source. The car erupted into protests. Everyone shouted at once, questions, objections, denials, but the man held up his hand, silencing them. The park isn't just abandoned, it's cursed, he said. The creatures you saw, they're not of this world. They're tied to something deep in the heart of that place, something old, something evil. What is it? Paige asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man hesitated before speaking. No one knows for sure. Some say it's the remains of a ritual gone wrong. Others think it's a gateway. But whatever it is, it's the reason those things exist. If you destroy it, you might be free. Might? Ethan repeated incredulously. That's not exactly reassuring. The man's gaze hardened. It's your only chance. A tense silence filled the car. The weight of the man's words settled over them like a shroud. Finally, Mason exhaled sharply. This is insane. We're not going back. You don't have a choice, the man said simply. If you don't deal with it, they'll deal with you. And when they do, there won't be anything left. As the man stepped back into the shadows, Mason hit the gas, the car surging forward. The others sat in stunned silence, the man's warning echoing in their minds. None of them spoke the rest of the way back to town, but they all knew the truth. This wasn't over. That night, Riley woke to the sound of creaking metal outside her bedroom window. She sat up, her heart pounding, and glanced toward the glass. At first, she saw nothing but the faint glow of the street lamp. Then, in the shadows at the edge of the light, a pair of sickly yellow eyes blinked open.